It's time to make a case for three looming directions the New York Giants will need to decide on in the coming months. We'll tell you what they are, the pros and cons of each, and what we would do in each, coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina, P-Train, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On and also for Giants Country, part of the Fan Nation Network. And I want to send a special welcome to my everydayers, my Blue Crew community members, my newcomers, and everybody in between. You are all appreciated and loved. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. And on today's program, we're going to do Make the Case. So I've got three situations for you in which we're going to make a case for different scenarios in each. And the three cases that we're looking at, we're going to start off with the first round one projection for the Giants in the draft. Should they do offensive line, quarterback, wide receiver, or something else? Then we're going to look at Saquon Barkley, to tag or not to tag. And then our third making the case situation is going to be, is this a make or break year for Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll? So those are our three situations in which we are going to make the case, and I'm going to tell you arguments for each side, and then I'm going to tell you what I would do if it were my call. So again, welcome on into the program. Let's get started because we've got a lot, as usual, to cover. All right, so we're going to kick it off with, what direction should the Giants go in for round one of the draft? And I've narrowed it down, folks, to offensive line versus quarterback versus wide receiver. I am convinced that the Giants will go offense in the first round of the draft. Now, that's as of this recording. Obviously, as we get into the combine and deeper into free agency and whatnot, that might change. But for right now, I'm thinking they go offense. So let's start off with making a case for quarterback. We all know the situation with Daniel Jones. He's coming off of an ACL. He's had 2 neck injuries in the last 3 years, and he hasn't really progressed steadily. He's looked better in 2022, but last year he regressed. And people will say, oh, it was the offensive line. Oh, it was the fact that he didn't have receivers. Oh, it was the fact that the coaching stunk. You got to stop making excuses, folks. At this point, if you don't know what you have in Daniel Jones, if he hasn't shown an ability to take an upward trend consistently, it's time to start wondering what you have in him. And then you throw in the injury situation on top of it. And there's a lot of uncertainty with the future of the quarterback spot on this team. So you can certainly make a case that if one of the top quarterbacks falls to the Giants in round one, that you go in that direction. Now, I do not think that will be the case. And spoiler alert, over on Giants Country, I posted a mock draft. Actually, the mock draft will be up 8 o'clock in the morning on Monday morning. So depending on when you're listening to this, you might not see the mock draft, but it will be up on Monday morning. And spoiler alert, I did not go quarterback in the first round. I'm not going to tell you where I went or how I got there, but you'll just have to check it out. So the case for quarterback, obviously, is Daniel Jones's history, his injury history, and the fact that he hasn't progressed. The case against the quarterback is you don't want to end up reaching. This is a deep class. You could conceivably get yourself a decent quarterback on day 2 at some point. If you play your cards right, you could also trade back into the bottom of the first round if you want to. So you don't have to reach for a guy at 6. You know, we can argue and say that the Giants, last time they had the 6th overall pick in the draft, what did they do? they reach for a quarterback. That quarterback, Daniel Jones. So quarterback, if we're up to me, unless one of those top guys falls, and even then I'd have some reservations depending on who it is, because the guy I would want for the Giants is Jaden Daniels, and I don't think he gets down to them at 6. If he's there, I take him. If he's not, then I go in a different direction. All right. Let's talk offensive line, because a lot of you say, hey, if they don't fix the offensive line, what good is it? What good is getting a quarterback or a receiver or a running back or a tight end or whatever position that you want to pick for the offense? To me, folks, given the importance of this coming year, the fact that the Giants have got to start showing progress, they have got to hit the ground running, in my opinion. So you can make an argument that they should draft an offensive lineman to add to what they have, but I am of the opinion that you go the veteran route here. You get a veteran in here that has guard tackle capability. You plug him in. You have a competition between Marcus McKethan and Joshua Izudu. And then if you bring back Ben Bredesen, you let him compete for the other guard spot. You hope that Evan Neal is better. But just to be on the safe side, obviously you want to draft an offensive lineman, I think, somewhere along the line. Maybe not in round 1, but you want to have somebody in the development stage. Tyree Phillips probably will not be ready to go. So, I mean, a lot of you would say, well, why not just re-sign him? I don't know if he's going to be ready to go given how late he suffered his injury. So I repeat, if you are the Giants, you need to hit the ground running with your offense. And while it would certainly be intriguing to put a young offensive lineman taken in the first round at number 6, I don't think that's the way to go, because you could pick the best offensive lineman on the board. There's still going to be growing pains. And for a unit that really needs to come along quickly, I would rather see them hit the ground running with a veteran. We saw how Justin Pugh, came in last year and he helped calm down that line. I think the Giants need to consider that route for the offensive line going forward, because it doesn't matter. Like I said, if that line is as bad as it was last year, it doesn't matter who's behind center or who the skill position players are. They're not going to go very far. All right. So that leads us to receiver. And if you haven't figured it out by now, receiver is the direction I would go at number 6. A receiver, to me, can probably help the Giants offense right away. If they can get a legitimate number 1 receiver, and this is a deep class, and there are some guys that should be available at number 6 that can probably qualify as number 1 receivers. I think that's going to help regardless of who the quarterback is. That's going to help with the offensive line as well, because if that receiver can get open quickly and allow for the quarterback to throw the ball and get it out of his hands quickly, I think a receiver is going to make all the more difference for an offense, a number 1 receiver. Plus, you can make the case that the guys that the Giants had at receiver last year, Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, and Jalen Hyatt, they weren't bad, but I don't know that there was a number 1 receiver amongst them. Wan'Dale is kind of like a gadget player. Slayton, I would say, is probably more of a number 2 than a number 1. And Hyatt, we're still learning more about, because he just, for whatever the reason, they didn't deploy him as much as I thought they might. So he could ultimately become a number 1. I don't know. But if I'm the Giants, I prioritize getting a number 1 receiver. I don't go the free agent route, because I think that's going to cost them an arm and a leg. If you can get a number 1 receiver with your 6th overall pick, you do it. So to make the case, I'm going receiver unless one of the top quarterbacks falls to the Giants. And I don't see that happening, not with Washington and New England in front of them, and possibly with Chicago looking to take a quarterback. I just don't think any of those quarterbacks are going to fall to the Giants. I'm going receiver, and I'm going to wait, for quarterback in day 2. And I'm going to address the offensive line, like I said, going the veteran route. All right, coming up next, tag or no tag for Saquon Barkley. I'll give you both sides of the coin and tell you what I would do right after this. Hey, Giant fans, football season is officially in the books, but that doesn't mean the excitement of betting on sports is over. Because right now you can get buckets when you place your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. So head on over to fanduel.com/locked on and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Coming up this week on the Locked On Giants podcast, we're going to start to do position breakdowns, what the Giants need, and if they should go draft or if they should go free agency and why. And we'll look at some of the names, some of the prospects, obviously, in the draft class, and we'll kind of just do a thorough roster overview. So we'll do one position per day, and just kind of that'll lead us up to the combine, which starts next week. Also coming up on the Locked On Giants podcast later this week, I've got OC Umenyiora, former Giants defensive end, joining me. We're going to talk a little bit about the Giants, and we're also going to talk about the NFL's International Pathway Program. Those of you who saw the Super Bowl no doubt saw the commercial in which OC was featured for the International Pathway Program. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but we're also going to talk about Giants because, OC obviously part of the Giants and one of the last great pass rushers that the team had, a position of need, by the way, these days for the Giants. But we will talk about all that with OC. That's coming up this week. So hope you will join us. Let's get back to our Making the Case series here. Tag or no tag for Saquon Barkley. Now, if you've been listening to me and reading me, you probably know that I have been kind of dug in a little bit on tagging Saquon because, Saquon to me is probably one of the few players that you can consider touchable, meaning, he's not like a Dexter Lawrence. Dexter Lawrence is untouchable. You're not going to trade him. You're not going to trade an Andrew Thomas. Saquon Barkley is a guy I think, they would consider moving if the price was right. Now, you can't move a guy unless he has a signed contract. So my thinking was, okay, if you don't get a deal done with him, and it's clear that both sides do want to get a deal done, do you put the franchise tag on him? And then, continue to see if you can get something done, at which point, if you have a certain date that you cut things off, you say, okay, we can't get a deal done. Saquon, you've got our permission. Go work out a trade with another team. And, if we like it, we'll trade you. You'll get your deal. We'll get our comp picks and so forth. The one negative to that, obviously, is that the Giants are going to lose about $12 million right off the bat if they have to put the tag on him. They can't really afford to do that if they're going to address offensive line, if they're going to get a veteran at cornerback, if they're going to sign a veteran quarterback. There's a lot that the Giants have to do. So to tie up $12 million in a running back that may or may not be on this roster, the more I think about it, the less sense it makes. So what do you do with Saquon? I go back to last year and how the Giants were insistent that they weren't going to trade Saquon and how they told him, we're not going to trade you. Right now, I can't remember off the top of my head if they got offers for him. I want to say that they did, but the Giants basically said, nope, he's untouchable. We're not trading him. And they kept to their word. So I'd like to wonder if maybe that built up some goodwill with Saquon to where they can go to him. And this idea was floated, I think, by the New York Post a couple weeks ago, to where the Giants can go to Saquon and say, look, we are not going to tag you. We will let you go out and test the market. However, we want you to come back with any offers you get and give us a chance to match it. And Saquon told the Post that he would be agreeable to such an offer. Now, here's the thing, folks. The market is going to be kind of flooded with running backs this year. At least that's how it's projected to be. You're going to have Josh Jacobs. You're going to have Tony Pollard. I believe Derrick Henry's going to hit the market. Nick Chubb may get released. I know he's rehabbing from an injury and whatnot. There's going to be options for teams out there if they want a running back, a veteran running back. So if you put Saquon out there, a guy who has never, won a rushing yardage title, a guy who has never been named an All-Pro, a guy who, other than being named Rookie of the Year and has a couple of Pro Bowls, if you look at the top 5 running backs that are the top highest 5 running backs in the league right now, Saquon's credentials really don't match up with theirs. So if you're the Giants, does it make sense to let Saquon go out and test the market, knowing that there may not be an offer that comes in that's going to blow you out of the water? The more I think about it, the more I think it does. And now, it's a gamble, because you could say, well, what happens if Dallas or Philadelphia come along and they put an offer in front of him and try to get him? Okay, I mean, if it happens, it happens. If Saquon, signs with them, do the Giants really need to be afraid? If they beef up their run defense and whatnot, and Saquon, who has had injury issues throughout his career, who has pretty much been a feast or famine type of runner, do you really need to be afraid that he's going to come back and losing him is going to haunt you if you have to face him twice a year? I'm not so sure you do. And I'm not trying to disrespect Saquon here, mind you, but I'm not so sure you should use that as an excuse to be afraid to where you maybe have to control the rights to where he goes. Now, the drawback, obviously, is if you don't match an offer that Saquon gets as a free agent, you don't get anything for him, at least not until next year. And that's if your own free agency activity doesn't cancel out anything Saquon would bring back in terms of a comp pick. So that really doesn't help you if you're the Giants this year when you have so many needs. But keep in mind, the Giants can do other things. They can trade around if they need to, trading, down in let's say the second round, or maybe even in the first round if they feel that the guy that they want is going to be there a few picks later. So there are things the Giants can do to get more picks if they need to. Remember, they're not getting any comp picks this year. So that all being said, tag or don't tag Saquon, I'm going to go to the side of don't tag him. You need the money to do free agency. It also sends goodwill, I think, if you don't tag him. If you say, Saquon, look, we trust you to come back to us with an offer to match. Because remember, Joe Shane, Brian Dable, they have worked hard to build up a culture in that locker room. And if they start doing guys like Saquon dirty by saying, nope, we want to control where you go and under what circumstances and all that stuff, they're going to ruin their credibility that they built up in that locker room. And I don't think it's worth it to them to do that. So the more I think about this, the more it makes sense not to tag Saquon. Now, remember, the Giants and Saquon's representatives are going to sit down at the combine, which starts, next week. They're going to try to get something done. Hopefully they get it done and we don't have to talk about this anymore the rest of the offseason. But if they don't, that is an option. And quite frankly, I think it would be in Saquon's best interest to stay with New York, because even if he doesn't get a humongous payday, the marketing opportunities that he has gotten as a member of the Giant should more than compensate for, any revenue that he might have lost because of his injuries or because he was franchise tagged last year, whatever. I'm not so sure if Saquon goes to another team, he gets those types of deals. Very few players outside of the New York market I've found over the years have gotten national deals. I mean, you can think of Baker Mayfield with Progressive and Aaron Rodgers and Pat Mahomes with State Farm. You see more national deals, I think, for Saquon because he's just so marketable. And I would think that has to factor into the conversation that Saquon has to have with his representatives. So we'll see how that plays out. But to make the case, I'm going to say don't tag him. Let him go out, test the market, see what he brings, and then go from there. All right, coming up next, year 3 of the Joe Shane, Brian Dable era. Make or break? Spoiler alert? Yes. Tell you more right after this. Hey, Giant fans, if you're having trouble finding those last minute tickets to your favorite concerts, shows, and sporting events, Game Time has you covered. They offer a wide selection of seats, complete with seat views to help you decide where you want to purchase your tickets. And they're constantly offering last minute tickets through flash deals. There are no hidden fees. You'll know exactly what your deal is before you check out. And Game Time even has tickets available as late as an hour after an event starts, making it truly the best place to find last minute deals at amazing prices. You want more reasons to trust Game Time? They offer event cancellation protection. And if you find your tickets in the same section and row for less elsewhere, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So go on and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Terms apply. That app again is Game Time. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. You got me, Patricia Traina, your host, and we are making the case for various topics here that are facing the Giants, decisions that they have to make, both in the short term and the long term. And in this segment is year 3, a make or break year for Brian Dable and Joe Shane. I think it is. But let's first go through the scenarios, why it is and why it's not. If you're John Mara, one of the co-owners, you want to see progress, all right? You don't want to see the team stuck in neutral. And can we say that the Giants have shown progress, all right? The first year of the Dable and Shane era, they went 9-7-1. They made the playoffs. People were saying, oh, they had an easy schedule. Everything fell into place. And we all got kind of fooled. We all thought, okay, great. The Giants did it then. They're going to be better. They're going to have this great draft. They're going to be healthy. They're going to take a step up and they're going to be fine. And then everything fell apart. And you can make the argument that, the schedule was a bear, although the schedule is what it is. There's not a whole lot a team can do about it. You can make the argument about the injuries and say that the injuries ruined the chemistry. You can also make a case that the team really wasn't ready to start the season last year to overcome those obstacles that they faced. And by that, I mean, you look at training camp and how the starters played sparingly in the preseason games, and just how the whole offense especially came together, with the flip-flopping of the offensive line lineups and the uncertainty. And then, they go out week 1 against Dallas last year and they get absolutely punched in the mouth. They don't recover. And this season goes down the toilet from that point onward. So you can make all those arguments as to why the Giants took a step backwards. You can also make the argument that they were lacking a talent. The offensive line, as we saw, was a mess. All right. Injuries didn't help it, but it was still a mess. The quarterback play went backwards, and again, I know you're going to say, well, if you're saying the offensive line was a mess, you can't blame it on the quarterback. Yeah, we still saw Daniel Jones taking his sweet time with post-processing reads. We saw Tyrod Taylor, who was a little bit better, suffer injuries, which he has done every year since he's been a Giant. We saw, an undrafted rookie, Tommy DeVito, who really probably was not ready for the bright lights, be forced into action because they had nothing else behind him. All right. So that all being said, the Giants went backwards. Now, year 3 of the Shane and Dable era, make or break. It's definitely a make or break year. All right. And I say that because if the Giants don't show progress, and I define progress as not only better more wins, a better 1-loss record, but also being competitive in the division, where last year they went 3-3. Okay. You want to see progress, not necessarily linear progress, but you want to see them, you want to see the team in week 18 that's a lot better than the team in week 1. All right. I'm not saying that the Giants need to make it to the Super Bowl to show progress. That's asking a lot, but they have got to show some kind of growth from week 1 to week 18. These draft picks that Joe Shane are bringing in, I put an article out. I didn't write it, but one of my writers over at Giants Country did a comparison. NFL.com, CBS did not give the Giants class of 2023 high grades. And they've got to get more out of those guys, right? Deontay Banks looks like he's a keeper. John Michael Schmitz obviously looks like he's a keeper. We didn't see a lot of Jalen Hyatt. Why? Coaching, maybe, or maybe the kid wasn't ready. I don't know. And then you had the rest of the class, which really didn't develop or make that big of an impact. You go back the year prior, Evan Neal right now is sticking out like a sore thumb because he hasn't developed the way they had anticipated he would. So in that regard, this next draft class of Joe Shane's has got to be a home run. You've got 4 picks in the top 100, actually in the top 70 right now. If you can't find at least 3 starters that can make an impact for you amongst those first 4 picks, then something's really wrong here. All right. You've got to get better production out of these guys. Same thing with the coaching. You can make a case that some of the coaching last year left something to be desired. Brian Daboll realized that. He made changes to his staff. They have to get these guys up and running. Now, what would be an exception to saying that this would be a make or break year for Daboll and Shane? Well, if they bring in a rookie quarterback, for example, and they suddenly decide, oh, okay, you know what? We brought in a guy that we drafted in the 2nd round, for example. Now we need to develop him. I don't think in that case that it's going to hurt them. In other words, if they bring in a premium draft pick that is a quarterback, and if the Giants have a bad year, they're going to get another year at least to make sure that that guy gets developed. All right. I think regardless of what happens. Now, if they say, okay, you know what? We don't need a quarterback because we believe Daniel Jones is the guy and we're sticking with him come, heck or high water. Then, folks, I think they're taking their careers into their own hands, if you will. So I do think the pressure is on. I don't necessarily think that John Mara and Steve Tisch would get rid of those guys after this coming season, the 2024 season. It would have to be an absolute catastrophic event for that to happen. Daboll would have to lose the locker room. Shane would have to do something really, really stupid. I don't think that's going to happen. I think a quarterback, like I said, if they bring in a young quarterback, that's going to save them. That's going to buy them some more time. But that said, there's got to be progress shown. And if there is not progress shown, that seat under the head coach in particular is going to get really, really hot. And it's going to be interesting to see if ownership decides that, you know what, this ain't working. We got to go in a different direction. So, all right, everybody, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Make sure you tune in tomorrow when we start our Making the Case series for each position group on the New York Giants. We look at free agency, the draft, names, what they should do, the priority, all that stuff's going to be covered. We're going to do each position group each day. Don't miss it. We'll see you tomorrow, Giant fans.